ULF. This is Chairman Jack. Today we're doing on central planning and coronavirus. This will simply be an expansion on our What is Central Planning video, as well as bring in some modern geopolitical problems that a lot of people are facing. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
Hi there, this is Comrade Taras.
This is Ormica.
And this is Comrade Wiktora.
Yeah, to start it off, I'll let Wiktora say a quote that I think is pretty good. It's an expansion on the quote that we used during What is Central Planning?
Yes, and it's also from the same book, obviously. And the quote goes as follows: "The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by a degree all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state. It est of the proletariat organized as the ruling class. When, in the course of development, class distinctions have disappeared and all production has been concentrated in the hands of a vast association of the whole nation."
Yeah, to give just a quick simplicity of that is Marx is basically saying, and Marx and Engels and the whole of the First International are basically saying right there that, central planning will be solely run by the people, the proletariat, it won't be run by bureaucrats or whoever, it won't be run by capitalists. And to further expand it, that is what's going to lead into the eventual ending of the state. The state will have no more reason to exist because there will be no more class antagonisms. And so that's something we're not really going to focus on as much, but it's just a real good basis to lay out for this video and what we're going to talk about. So I guess we can just dive right in. So basically something I just want to get out of the way is to just bring up how every country that is doing central planning in some shape or the other, or has had central planning, are the countries that have been best suited and best adapted to be able to handle the coronavirus crisis and have been doing the most around the world. See China, Cuba, Venezuela, less so with central planning, but they still have it to a large degree. But have gone to Italy or going to Africa or going all around the world to aid people. Joint facilities are being set up by China and Cuba to help the most people around the world. And I just think it's almost funny to see that, like, in Italy, they're tearing down EU flags and putting up Chinese ones. It's just very humorous to see that now people are starting to see that central planning can work and does work. But in the U.S., they'd rather, be xenophobic and orientalists rather than simply looking at these great things that are being done.
Yes, and to just go off of what Jack has been saying, the USA worships literally the stock market. There's never been a time when they've focused on, helping the people. They've always talked about profits. But when you look at, China and Cuba, they set up like a joint biomedical, building and facility. They already have, alpha 2B. It's like a medical particle, basically, and they're mass producing that, and they're sending it all over the world right now. China and Cuba are sending doctors all over the world, as Jack has just stated, not because they want to, profit, but because, the common good, the good for the proletariat is the main goal of central planning, and the world is our eventual goal. And, tying it back to, central planning, we wouldn't be seeing Cuban doctors all over the world right now if it weren't for the miracles, which are real, by the way, of central planning. It's because the people of Cuba really value everybody. But I'm going to stop here for a second.
And to jump off that point, it is really miraculous that they're able to deal with the coronavirus in their country, Cuba. They were able to take those cruise ships that we kind of abandoned, right? They invited them to Cuba to be treated, and then they're also able to send those doctors up. Like they're able to do all of it, which is pretty amazing in my view.
Yeah, I think it's very just evident of look at what the US is doing right now, and with their responses so internal, and they're not helping anyone around the world. Yet look at what China and Cuba are doing, where they have their own problems. Yet they're going everywhere. They're doing everything they possibly can. And my number one critique of China has always been their social isolation and not really doing anything. But now I think, due to the boot being off the neck a little bit, they're finally able to come out and actually do real things and be able to help people all around the world. And I just think it's just really great to see that a country that has central planning and is, whatever you want to call it, post-capitalist, socialist, whatever, call it a unicorn, I don't care, but is helping people around the world and trying to build the most support for a system and at least a model of anti-imperialism that we can possibly rival US hegemony around the world. And I just think that's so wonderful to see.
Yeah, I think absolutely, especially to put it in contrast to the United States and the response that they've had to all of this, how it's largely kind of the blame has been shifted onto the populace and onto the populace for spreading this virus and for doing it to themselves and for not being able to self-isolate and to quarantine and all of these things, which is definitely a part of it, but it's completely like shirking their own responsibility of the government to look out for these type of things and to enact certain policies and certain necessary steps during a time like this. And just the way that they've largely just put it in the hands of companies and individuals and businesses to account for all of this and to take over all of this. And it's really just it shows like the failure of the market, and it shows like how beneficial central planning can be in comparison to it.
And to just make one small comment, like Cuba, as I said in the What is Central Planning video, is one of the most sanctioned nations of the world, no thanks to the USA and all, and yet it's able to help the world. Just give that some food for thought.
Right, and I think that talking about the problems the U.S. is facing a little more concretely, like I think that like the markets were watching states bid against each other on masks, ventilators, all that stuff. It is really, really ridiculous. To just watch.
Yeah, we have governors and senators, recording Twitter videos in their front yard, like begging the president and begging our government for basic medical supplies and basic like healthcare needs. It's ridiculous that this is the level that we've descended to.
And just to throw in a wrench to all of this, like I've been only reading some news articles. I don't know if it's totally true, but like, British and Canadian governors have been, forcing doctors to work under very serious and dangerous conditions. Same thing with, New York doctors just being given ponchos instead of proper sterilized, gear. They're all forced to work. They either perish through the disease or they perish through being in the streets. We really need to do something.
Right, it's horrifying process.
Yeah, I just think it goes to show like the barbarism of the current system that we're in. I just think it is just, we're starting to see this real end stage of capitalism, that it's saying, well, we're either going to, like Rosa Luxemburg talking about socialism or barbarism. Like,
yes.
we're at the table where you're seeing more and more barbaric conditions. And I think that has been really, the mask has been taken off of the system due to coronavirus, and then we're seeing what capitalism truly is. and I think it just made everything a lot more clear about where the system is headed.
Right, and I think that is important to hammer home is like the response to the coronavirus since we've known about it. They downplayed it. Then you saw a bunch of senators were able to sell off their stocks for hundreds of thousands of dollars between them. Even Democrats, even the ones who are supposedly on our side as working class people, even they didn't warn us to knowledge they were privy to, and they sold off their stocks and got rich off of it. They hid all of the issues that the coronavirus could cause, just to keep the stock markets afloat for a handful more days, another month, another 2 months, and now we're seeing the effects of that.
Yeah, and I think it's seeing like double paired is you're starting to see the death cult of capitalism where you're having like random elderly people basically say, oh, I'd be fine to die for the system just so people could, have the economy go on a little bit farther. And then you're also just seeing this like the other side of it where people are just becoming hyper competitive and trying to get masks and stuff. Like Donald Trump has seized medical shipments, and I don't know if anyone else has heard about this, but has seized medical masks going to Europe, and Germany has literally called them pirates. Like all these capitalist nations are just turning into rabid dogs and trying to get at each other's throats.
Oh gosh, talking about that, I think there was also a story that was ran where someone that was supposed to supply, Cuba, what China was sending to Cuba, someone in America decided to just seize it and then just retreat it back to Florida. So there's that horrifying story.
Oh yeah, and then the fun thing, I guess, if there is ever a fun thing about a pandemic like this, is that you are seeing just how delicate these markets really are. One pandemic and then suddenly we have, what was it, Tuesday last week, 6.6 million people get on unemployment insurance. Yeah, a lot of people. I know here in Utah, we had a record number of people jump onto it, like we've never seen before.
Yeah, I think one of the most great historical examples of central planning hopping in, it's honestly, well, it might not be one of the greatest, but I just think it's very interesting to hear, was after I believe it was Hurricane Maria hit Cuba. I had a lot of comrades go down to Cuba with the Venceremos Brigade that year, and you couldn't even tell that there was a hurricane because of how rapidly they like made everyone leave their homes, and they paid for them to stay at hotels or other people's houses and things like that. Then fully rebuilt their houses, cleaned up all the rubble, and then the only things you saw were like knocked down trees and things like that. Like people went back from their houses, got electricity back, all of these things in a matter of a month or less. Versus Puerto Rico, many parts of the island still don't have electricity. And that was something that destroyed many parts of the Caribbean. Yet in Cuba, it was settled and fixed in most of the part for a month.
Yeah, it's fascinating just to see how effective a response like that can be. And, you have to recognize the work that actually goes into that, which is the core of central planning, is consulting with the people and the workers and devising what is most effective at the time for the people, through the people.
Oh, yes. And, I want to bring up two historical USSR examples. First off, like the Kulak crisis, where, like at the time there was some food shortages and whatnot, but, through USSR discipline and like sending delegates to check up on the farms, despite the setback that the kulaks made, like burning the crops, slaughtering the animals, and salting the field, like the USSR was able to collectivize quickly, hand out technologies, organize people, and they were able to recover from that food crisis very fast, mind
Yeah,
you.
and there wasn't another food shortage, except in '48, but up until the '90s, which is just mind-boggling.
Oh, and you know what? To continue on, like what would essentially be 22 years later, the India at the time, ruled by Britain, even though India was free, quote unquote, India would have like a, food crisis and whatnot. And Stalin would just personally cut through the bureaucracy and say, papers can wait, food cannot. And India was provided a large sum of food that they desperately needed to survive. But what did Britain do? Nothing, because Churchill wanted to starve them all. After all, Churchill did view Indians as Christian breeding rabbits, anyways.
Oh, yeah, and I think that does show the strengths. Like Ingalls talks about the anarchy of the markets and the chaos of the markets, and they're just not reliable. They're just not a reliable source of anything. They're not a reliable source of employment, as we're seeing. they're not a reliable source for medical supplies or any kind of response, because it's just so profit driven and none of us get a say in it. We just get to watch the markets dictate our lives and hope that they're going to be benevolent, when under a social planning system we can directly dictate what kind of production goes where, and then we can reconstruct things in an instant without having to negotiate a bunch of different bourgeois legal works or through that kind of bureaucracy that they'll use to obscure the process.
Yeah, I think that's a great, fundamental of how everything has gone with this coronavirus, and a fundamental for how central planning works. And basically, I think a final wrap up would just to be, once again, to say what central planning is, and that is, to put it very, very briefly, as we've kind of put in our What Is video, but to just put it very, very briefly, is to centralize all instruments of the means of production, or instruments of production, in the hands of the state, i.e. the proletariat, organized as the ruling class. And to just say, at its most fundamental, central planning is putting the people in charge of the economy and making it a people's economy, not a bourgeois economy.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's what it is. It's central planning is social planning. It's consulting the people and letting them construct, the most effective, government and economy and everything for themselves. And there's nothing human or sympathetic about the market system.
Yes, it is the plan of the people, not the desire of profit.
Yeah, and to give a quote of inspiration to anyone listening in this time of crisis and how bad things are getting, is just simply a quote from Mao at the Moscow meeting of communists and workers' parties in November 18th, 1957 is, I have said all the I have said that all the reputedly powerful all the powerful reactionaries are merely paper tigers. The reason is that they are divorced from the people. Look, was Hitler not a paper tiger? Was Hitler not overthrown? I said that the Tsar of Russia, the Emperor of China, and Japanese imperialism were all paper tigers. As we know, they were all overthrown. The U.S. imperialists have yet to be overthrown, and it has the atom bomb. I believe that it will be overthrown too, as it is also a paper tiger. I apologize for mix up right there, but to put it just simply is, we may be afraid of these fascists and things like that, but they cannot win as they are not connected to the people. We looked at the motions of history, and this coronavirus stuff has taken the mask off of the society. It is a cruel society. It is a brutal society. And the only way we can get through that is socialism and social planning. And the only way that can come about is by defeating these paper tigers in the streets. So that is really, if anyone else has any last statements, but that is mine.
Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for listening.
And I have been Chairman Jack.
Comrades.
This has been Ormica.
And this has been Comrade Wiktora.